Our story begins with our protagonist catching his breath, exhausted and in pain, thinking that he doesn't want to die. He tried his best to quickly escape, but his body was in so much pain, making him furiously wonder why it was only him going through this. He then tripped on his own feet and slammed onto the floor, which made him let go of his sword. He shakily tried to stand up while coughing and calling for someone to help him, but his body fell, and Takamichi Yoshito, a low-tier challenger, lay on the floor, hopelessly crying and begging for someone to help him. Suddenly, someone huge stepped onto the ground, making the whole place shake. It then walked closer to him, and it was the elite demon. He shakily stood up to face the elite demon, wondering how miserable he was to be tormented and looked down upon. He then furiously asked if it was fun and if they were satisfied now. He then raised his sword and shouted that he would never give up, even if everyone laughed at him or that damned world abandoned him. He then dashes toward the elite demon while shouting that he had no choice but to move forward. But the elite demon just scratched him with its sharp claws even before he could attack it. He was in tears and felt hurt. He was on the ground while the elite demon gathered its power in its palm. He tried to crawl away from the elite demon aiming at him. The elite demon stared at him and attacked him with its power, but the elite demon missed by an inch. When he noticed that the impact affected the floor, he knew that it was bad. Suddenly, the ground shattered, and he raised his hand to the elite demon, swearing that he would definitely become a strong challenger. He then falls crying, screaming on top of his lungs, then the system informs him that he died. Magic Tower, an enigmatic structure beyond human understanding, was the commonly known term for tower-like dungeons that suddenly appeared all over the world. The interior is like a world straight out of a game, with swords, magic skills, and monsters. The magic stones and treasures sleeping in the Magic Tower are traded at high prices, and those who sought treasures are called challengers. However, challenging the Magic Tower came with a risk to life. Even though it was like a game, death in the Magic Tower means death in reality. Yoshito, who had died, slowly opened his eyes and realized that he had died again. He slapped his face, knowing that this wasn't how things should go, while the system showed him that his death had been confirmed and his infinite revival skill had been activated. But the remaining time was 10 seconds. Infinite revival means that no matter how many times they die in the Magic Tower, it was a skill that could bring them back to life. But he was pissed, realizing that he had been fooled. After he graduated from high school, he lived a life filled with part-time jobs. However, when the Magic Tower appeared, he believed his life could change if he became a challenger. Every day became a struggle to seize magic stones and treasures. In order to win the competition, he tried to acquire a rare skill that no one else had. The one selling infinite revival was the merchant at the entrance of the Magic Tower. He withdrew all of his savings and even went into debt to purchase it, obtaining a body that doesn't die. However, as a death penalty, it applies a permanent debuff of 500 DEF. With infinite revival, each time he comes back to life, his abilities are reduced, and he has died 4 times so far. The first time he died, his DEF was reduced by 50. Even though his original stat value was only 53, which brought him to the brink of death with a single blow earlier. The second time, it was a reduction of 70 attack, and the third time, it was a reduction of 250 HP. The negative effect received is random each time, and this time around, his agility was reduced by 60. He laughed, knowing that if it kept getting rebuffed, only 1 point would be left to him. In the Magic Tower, the body structure changes based on their stats. If agility decreases, the body becomes heavier and eventually they'll become unable to move. Once it happens, they won't be able to continue as a challenger. He ended up burdened with debt and stuck with a completely worthless skill. The system showed him that he would be revived, so he should get ready, but he was getting frustrated. He then woke up and saw himself on the destroyed ground, wondering if he had come back to life. He sits up and notices that his body feels heavy, thinking it is probably because his agility has become 1. He knows that with it, even moving around is going to be tough for him. He then looks around, wondering where that place is and if he was right that he has fallen to a lower floor. He felt something around him, making him wonder what that atmosphere was, because he had never heard of such a place in the lower levels. He then noticed something shining in front of him and was shocked to see that it was a skill stone, and it was golden, which means it was ultra rare. He knows that it can be sold for a high price and it might be possible to repay the debt he took on. He tried to stand up, knowing that it was the only thing he was determined to bring back with him no matter what, and walked slowly to it, noticing that there were no monsters there, making him think that it was easy to win. But then, he stepped on tiles and the wall released a lot of holes. Suddenly, it threw knives that hit him in every part of his body, including his eye, making him shout in pain and die for the 5th time. His infinite revival has been activated, and as his death penalty, a permanent debuff of 65 strength has been applied. He revived again and noticed that the place was a trap. Clenching his teeth, he declared that such a level shouldn't even think it could stop him. However, he noticed that he couldn't move his limbs and his muscle strength was reduced. Leaning on the wall in weakness, he pushed against it, only to realize that it was another trap. Suddenly, a statue dragon emerged from underground, glared at him with its red eyes, and burned him alive. He died for the 6th time, revived once more, and as his death penalty, a permanent debuff of 250 HP was applied. He jumped to the side to avoid the continuous fire coming out of the dragon statue, and rolled to get closer to the rare skill. He was glad to see that he was closer and realized that the reason for the narrow passage's existence was to lure challengers enticed by rare skills and to effectively kill them with traps. He knew that under normal circumstances, no matter how many lives they have, they wouldn't be able to pass through. But he remarked that, unfortunately and surely, he was currently the weakest challenger in that magic tower, but he already had plenty of alternative lives. He then ran toward the rare skill, but then a huge blade fell above him, killing him for the 7th time. His infinite revival activated, and as his death penalty, his magic power was debuffed to 80 and his technical capabilities to 55. A moment later, he wondered how many times he had died because he had no sensation in his entire body, and his vision was also blurry while getting debuffed by 90 vitality and 40 magic resistance as a penalty. Once more, he got pierced by a swarm of spears coming from underground and got debuffed by 60 intelligence, making him feel like his consciousness was about to fade away. However, he managed to grab the rare skill, thinking it was his victory, but he slowly collapsed and the status asking him if he wanted to use the skill stone. A moment later, the system showed him that since there was no response, its automatic usage would be initiated, and he had acquired the skill Inversion. After that, he woke up confused because he felt stronger and his consciousness was clear. He wondered what was going on because he didn't feel the effects of the death penalties that were so harsh before. He then told the system to check his status, and he was shocked to see that the powerful negative effects he had been receiving until now had all turned into positives. The system then showed him that the skill Inversion effect is to reverse all effects, including buffs, debuffs, and status abnormalities. He understood that thanks to that skill, all the debuffs he had received so far had been reversed into positive effects. However, he wondered when he had acquired such a skill. Then he saw the rare skill stone box and realized it was empty, making him wonder if it had been automatically used. He realized that his money was gone. However, he thought it might be a good thing because all the penalties of infinite revival are reversed by Inversion. He'll get stronger every time he dies. With that power, as a challenger, he can now rise to the top and once more swears that no matter what, he will become the strongest challenger, earn a fortune, and acquire fame. He then looked behind him and saw the path with his blood spread everywhere, wondering if, in order to return home, he'd have to go that way. He knows that the instant death trap has returned to its pre-activated state, making him wonder if it will be activated again once he gets close and if it means he'll be killed again by all those instant death traps. He panics and shouts that there is no way he can do it because even if he was revived, it is still insanely painful, and if he died too many times in a row, then definitely, he'd go insane. He shivers upon remembering the pain he went through, but he knows that his current stats are now double the original, thanks to his Inversion skill, making him guess that he might be able to break through the traps head-on. He gulped in fear and faced the traps, knowing that there was no other way and he had no choice but to give it a try. When he had finished convincing himself, he dashed forward at speed, and suddenly, a wall came out from underground. Then arrows were thrown at him, the arrows coming closer to him, and he sweats when one of the arrows is close to his eye. But he manages to dodge them using his agility and successfully lands on the floor unharmed. He couldn't believe that he could see the traps in front of him, but he managed to avoid them at speed and run past them. Suddenly, the huge blade appeared above him to kill him instantly, but it was too slow for him now and he ran past it easily. He then bent down to get ready for the next trap and dashed toward the dragon statue that came out from underground. The statue opened its mouth to release fire, and he quickly opened his inventory and clicked his weapon out. He grabbed his sword and shattered the statue before it could burn him alive. But when he got down, he accidentally stepped on the trap tile, and a swarm of knives was thrown in his direction. Calmly waiting for them to come near, he swung his sword around, blocking every one of the knives heading toward him. Finally, he sighed in relief when he passed all the traps. He was convinced that the combination of infinite revival, which gave him a death penalty each time it was activated, and Inversion could indeed make him the strongest challenger. Looking up, he realized the sheer height of the hole he had fallen through before. He knew that if he were still his former self, climbing back up from there would have been impossible. Then, he positioned himself and jumped, rushingly moving to the side of the hole to ascend and finally managed to reach the floor where the elite demon resided. He saw the elite demon standing on the floor and apologized for making it wait. He then got down on the floor and the elite demon walked closer to him. He attempted to slash the demon with his sword, but the demon simply blocked it with its bare hand and threw him away. The elite demon positioned itself, and he pointed his half-sword at it while asking if it wanted to try killing him again. The demon screamed in anger, but he calmly told it that he would play along. He then leaped towards the elite demon and challenged it, asking how long it thought it could fight against his infinite lives with just one life of its own. He leaped towards the demon, and the demon met him with its claw, but he dodged it and remarked on the amazement of how his stats could increase similarly. Then, he slashed the demon's hand, making it shout in pain. It tried to grab him, but he taunted it, saying its attacks no longer scared him. He then kicked the demon's neck to propel himself higher and struck it with all his might, sending it crashing into the wall hard. He landed on the floor, believing in his victory. But then the demon unleashed a strong power, stunning him. Realizing the danger, he jumped aside to avoid it. The power surged directly towards him, and he saw the demon standing in anger afterward. However, the elite demon was shocked to find that its attack had missed. He mocked the demon, saying it was close, and then mused aloud that it didn't seem like any third-floor monster at all. He knew that the higher they went in the tower, the stronger the monsters became. But he was currently on the 3rd floor, where only weaker monsters should appear. He then dashed towards the elite demon to slash at its head with his sword. But he jumped backward when the demon unfurled its wings and attempted to crush him. Fortunately, he dodged in time and leaped higher, his stats significantly increased thanks to the death penalties. The elite demon soared up to meet him, launching attacks which he continuously blocked. Commenting on its unusual strength for this floor and its unfamiliarity, he parried the demon's attacks with his sword, but the demon managed to slam him down to the floor. Still, he stood up and demanded to know what the demon was, receiving only a growl in response. He declared that he didn't expect an answer and taunted the demon, asserting that it was up against an exponentially stronger enemy, so they should settle the conflict once and for all. The elite demon then amassed power in both hands, and he noticed that this time it was using both of its hands. While looking at the demon, he was confused when the demon began to create a sword from its power, and he told the demon it's preparing something more formidable by shaping the power into a weapon, signaling its readiness to go all out. It screamed at him and launched a continuous assault with its newly formed weapon, which he tried desperately to dodge. He fled, cursing, but then the elite demon appeared behind him and struck, forcing him to slam onto the floor to block the attack with his sword, shattering the ground beneath them. He shouted to the elite demon with a grin that it was almost there, but then he noticed something shining beside him and saw the demon channeling power in its other hand. He cursed in despair and was hit in the head with the attack, causing his head to explode. Consequently, he died, and as a death penalty, his strength was debuffed by 40, but the inversion skill reversed it to a plus 40. As the elite demon walked away, thinking he had died, he moved and was ready to attack it from behind. But the demon blocked his attack in time. Furious, he demanded to know how it dared to kill him. Then, leveraging his sword upward to gain force, he launched a series of continuous attacks on the confused demon, shouting that even though he could revive, it still hurt like hell. He noticed that, thanks to his strength buff, he could now push it back, yet it still wasn't enough. He then swung his sword into its body, eliciting a shout of pain from the demon. It retaliated by releasing a powerful energy and gathering it, shocking him. The demon then created a massive explosion, causing him to die and debuffing his agility by 60, which was, fortunately, reversed by his inversion skill. Relieved that his agility had been buffed this time, he thought that with it, he could defeat the elite demon. He looked at the elite demon, who stared back at him and told it that it had fought well, but it was not enough. He then dashed toward it at incredible speed, meeting it in the center. He managed to dodge its attack and, with all his might, slashed it in half. The demon stood still behind him, and its body began to shatter, then exploded, leading him to believe it was the end. He declared that ultimately, its life was limited, and it had no chance of winning from the start. However, he was stunned to see it remained intact. Approaching it, he stated that whether they were bound for hell, another place, or even if it gained infinite lives, he hoped they would meet again. He expressed his desire for a fair fight next time, marking a moment of respect and anticipation for a future encounter. After that, he sat down on the floor, exhausted but glad that he managed to defeat the elite demon somehow. He was frustrated that he had been killed twice again, even though he had gotten stronger. He then looked at his cracked sword and was surprised to see it shattered. He realized he needed a sturdier sword and stood up, knowing that he should gather some money by collecting the magic stones so he could buy a new weapon. He then grabbed the magic stones scattered around the place. A moment later, he arrived at the magic tower, Hermes, which is on the 1st floor in the safe area. At the entrance of each floor of the magic tower, there is a section where monsters do not appear, known as the safe area, where adventurers can rest. Also, while exploring the magic tower, they may obtain equipment and items. Additionally, there are often stalls in the safe area where they can buy and sell these items. After he bought a silver sword, he thought it wouldn't break easily but was dismayed because its price was high, and most of the stones he had gathered earlier were almost gone. However, he convinced himself it was worth it because he was going to rise from there. While he was busy thinking of the sword as an initial investment, he heard people whispering behind him. He looked back and saw challengers laughing and whispering that he was fooled into buying infinite revival and pitying him. He understood that for them, he was just a pitiful challenger who was sold a worthless skill. Angry, he told everyone that since they all knew about it, they should have told him before he got fooled. However, he knows infinite revival might just be considered trash to other challengers, but for him, who obtained the inversion skill, it was undoubtedly a god-tier skill. He smiled, thinking it was a skill that only he could master, and wondered if it sounded kind of cool. Suddenly, he heard someone shout loudly, making him look back in panic, and saw a chubby man with his minions arrogantly asking if he didn't say he'd challenge the mid-boss room on the 5th floor. The chubby man then introduced himself as the Dominator, Nagishi, making him frustrated when he realized who it was. Dominator is a title given to those who challenge the boss room at the top of the magic tower, and the magic tower disappears once the boss on the top floor is defeated. Those who defeat the boss can obtain powerful, unique equipment, and he knows that dominators are usually respected by ordinary challengers. However, Nagishi is somewhat arrogant, but he is surprised to see the person arguing with Nagishi. The lady angrily asks Nagishi if she was right that he was just a person who happened to challenge a low-tier magic tower, and shouts to Nagishi that anyone could do the same. Shiramachi Yuri, who was level 13, tried to stop Sekiyamana, who was level 15, and told her that fighting wasn't a good idea. However, Mana told Yuri to let go of her, arguing that they had found the mid-boss room first. Mana also questioned Yuri if it was really okay to let that fake dominator snatch away their rewards for clearing the dungeon. Yuri replied that the rewards for clearing the mid-boss room were tempting, but the dangers were numerous, and leaving it to Nagishi and the others might be a good idea, which rendered Mana silent. Nagishi, teasingly, told Mana that it looked like the conversation was settled, which irritated Mana. Nagishi then proudly told them that they, as little girls, should just keep quiet and watch, boasting that the unique equipment bestowed upon him as a dominator, Aegis Mimeses, could block any attacks. Nagishi and his minions then teased the girls with laughter, but then someone called Yuri and Mana from behind. They saw it was him, but Nagishi walked past the ladies and stared at him. Nagishi smiled teasingly and shouted that it was none other than Takamichi. Nagishi then told him that they say he got duped by that shady merchant into buying some worthless skill and asked him if it was pathetic to be the one being exploited. However, he kept his silence and sighed. He then suggested to the ladies that they give the mid-boss to Nagishi and the others, which shocked Mana and led her to ask why even he agreed. He told Mana to calm down and explain that afterward, the three of them would challenge the boss room at the top with speed that even Nagishi and the others couldn't keep up with. Yuri asked him what he was saying, and he explained to them that he wasn't just saying random stuff, he had a proper plan to win. Nagishi was angered upon hearing his words and called him mother fudge in anger, but he just peeked back and saw Nagishi launching an attack on him while shouting at him not to say that he was bullying him. However, he easily dodged Nagishi's attacks. He then tripped Nagishi, causing Nagishi to be confused. Nagishi then fell to the ground. Nagishi's minions rushed to him and asked if he was okay, while Nagishi was confused and asked what had just happened. Nagishi then saw a shadow behind him, and he asked Nagishi how long he was going to keep rolling around. He then laughingly told everyone that since they were all there, he wanted to see Dominator Nagishi's great skill in challenging the mid-boss. He then turned around and asked them if they should go. A moment later, they arrived at the magic tower, Hermes, on the 4th floor. Mana called him from behind and, with a tone of worry, asked if it was safe to follow Nagishi. She explained that her concern stemmed from the fact that, as he knows, Nagishi isn't that strong. Yuri chimed in, sharing her worries as well, pointing out that the monsters they've encountered up to now have been really strong. If they get caught up in a fight, it could spell their end. However, he reassured them calmly that it would be fine. Mana and Yuri, challengers whom he met in the magic tower, are well aware that Mana is level 15 and Yuri is level 13, whereas he, being level 8, is comparatively weaker. Naturally, their concern was understandable. Yet, he knew that his current self, regardless of his level, had significantly increased in status. So, if they got into a fight, he was confident he could take them all down. Nagishi then teasingly called to him, saying it was fine to observe how they would defeat the mid-boss, but he'd be on his own against the lesser enemies. He couldn't believe Nagishi was being arrogant again, especially since he had seemed a bit scared earlier. He guessed that Nagishi had managed to pull himself together. Suddenly, the floor shook and they heard a loud growling sound. A monster then appeared behind Nagishi and attacked. But fortunately, Nagishi blocked the attack with his shield in time. Nagishi tried to attack the monster, but it jumped away in time and landed a distance away from Nagishi. The lizard man then stood up and growled angrily at them. Nagishi, undaunted, smiled, thinking that a single lizard man should be easy to handle. However, he warned Nagishi to wait, sensing that something was wrong. Suddenly, a swarm of eyes emerged from above them, and lizard men jumped down, surrounding them. Nagishi shouted in confusion, wondering why there were so many lizard men. Then, a differently colored monster emerged from the darkness and walked toward them, while the lizard men bowed to it. It was the lizard commander, a superior species of lizard man, commanding the swarm. The lizard commander teasingly pointed its weapon at them, and the lizard men jumped at them to attack. Initially surprised, he then smiled excitedly. Mana shouts to Yuri that they should protect him, to which Yuri agrees. The two ladies then position themselves at his back and front to protect him. He shouts back, assuring them that it's okay and he can fight too, but Mana insists he not act tough in a situation like this. He looks at Mana, confused, and she explains that those opponents are completely out of his league, which frustrates him. Yuri then calls out to him, expressing concern over the danger, and advises him to fall back. While Mana, Yuri, and the men were fighting around him, he tried to convince them that he could also fight, reaching out to them. But he stopped, realizing everyone considered him just a liability, and wondered about the unsettling feeling he was experiencing. On the other hand, Nagishi was busy attacking lizard men when the lizard commander dashed in front of him and attempted to decapitate him. Fortunately, Nagishi blocked the attack in time but was thrown away instead. Nagishi managed to land safely, but accidentally activated a tile that was a trap. Suddenly, the floor beneath him collapsed, and he fell, cursing. The ladies called out his name worriedly, but he questioned why he was the one falling and not Nagishi. He knows that the Magic Tower Hermes, as the name suggests, is filled with countless traps that challenge the adventurer's survival. However, traps like these no longer pose a threat to him. He noticed the floor he was about to slam into but managed to descend safely by jumping from pillar to pillar. He stood up, relieved to not have a single injury, but then turned around upon hearing a growl from behind and saw a swarm of lizard commanders. Realizing there were many lizard man commanders and no way to run, he questioned if they intended not to let him escape. He then pulled something from his storage, confronting the lizard commanders with the declaration that he had had enough and was tired of all these traps. The lizard commanders were stunned by his presence as he challenged them to come at him, stating it didn't matter how many there were, it would merely serve as a test for his new sword. He also warned them they would soon realize their mistake. Swiftly, he pierced through the swarm of lizard commanders, telling them they would witness the consequences of bringing him to that place and referring to them as shitty lizards. The lizard commanders began to encircle him, reminding him that all the lizard men present were of a higher rank, and until recently, they were opponents he certainly couldn't have beaten. One of the lizard commanders leaped towards him to attack, but he calmly positioned his sword. When the lizard commander brought his sword down in an attack, he counterattacked with his sword, leaving the lizard commander stunned. He then swung his sword back and sliced the lizard commander in half while proclaiming that he could now defeat them. Two more lizard commanders jumped above him to strike him down, but he rolled in the air to dodge their attacks. When the two lizard commanders faced each other, he beheaded them with a single swipe of his sword while landing. Catching his breath, he sternly questioned the remaining lizard commanders about their hesitation, mocking them to try and kill him if they could, which only angered them further. However, he charged towards them and easily dispatched them with his sword. He realized that he could properly engage with that number of opponents and that he was no longer the person who needed protection. After eliminating a swarm of lizard men, he addressed the retreating lizard men, asserting that they were frightened of death. He confessed understanding their fear as he had experienced death himself, which is why he promised to end them swiftly. The lizard commander, now shivering and crying in fear, witnessed his resolve. A moment later, after taking a deep breath from finishing off all of them, he noticed a staircase leading to another floor. He approached the stairs, knowing it was time to ascend from there. After a considerable journey to the stairs, the door on the 4th floor opened, and he stepped inside. Exhausted from the repetitive cycle of climbing up and tumbling down floors, he was met with astonishment by the ladies who rushed to his side. Yuri, with evident concern, approached him to check for any injuries, her inspection revealing none, which made her sigh in relief. She expressed her relief and her desire to have been of assistance, lamenting her inability to find any paths leading downward. Mana, equally concerned, questioned the plausibility of his solo journey, inquiring if he had encountered any monster attacks along the way. Surprised by their reaction, he reassured them that there were no issues, concealing the fact that he had slain a swarm of lizard man commanders on another floor. Curious about the fate of Nagishi and the others, he inquired after them. Yuri hesitated, but Mana disclosed that after his descent into the hole, she managed to fend off a group of lizard men. Meanwhile, Nagishi, presuming him dead, hastened towards the boss room. Mana expressed her irritation, noting the irony that Nagishi, the trigger of the trap, remained unscathed while he suffered the fall. He, however, urged her not to dwell in anger, reminding her that Nagishi's behavior was typical. Turning to Mana and Yuri with earnest gratitude for their concern, he elicited a puzzled yet warm smile from both ladies. With a bashful demeanor, he suggested they expedite their pursuit, hinting at the possibility of catching up with Nagishi and the others. However, his urgency turned to shock upon noticing a lizard man lurking behind the ladies, prompting speculation about its association with the creatures Nagishi and the others had failed to vanquish. The situation escalated quickly as the lizard commander lunged at Yuri. In a frantic attempt to protect her, he called out her name while reaching to intercept. As Yuri raised her gaze, the lizard commander launched an attack with its sword. He ceased his run upon realizing it might be too late, then bent down and leapt, fortuitously blocking the lizard man's attack with his sword just in time. Yuri, taken aback by his sudden appearance, watched as Mana engaged the lizard commander, insisting they leave it to her. She then slashed the lizard commander's chest with her dagger and looked back, warning him of the danger, but he merely sighed, sheathing his sword back into his inventory. Yuri awkwardly approached him, expressing her gratitude for the rescue. He shyly acknowledged that he was glad to have arrived in time. Amidst their awkward conversation, Mana, observing them with a smile, inquired how he managed to counter the attack. With a smirk, he suggested that perhaps he could indeed be useful, asserting that he was no longer merely dead weight. Moments later, they reached the Magic Tower Hermes' 5th floor. While the two ladies engaged in conversation behind him, he checked his status and discovered a remarkable increase of 2 levels following his confrontation with a multitude of lizardmen commanders. He recognized that the enhancement in his status wasn't due to a buff or debuff, indicating that it wasn't subject to reversal. He also noted a significant improvement in his stats, pondering the magnitude of this increase given the nature of his recent battles. He observed that the increase in his ATK from the inverted death penalty was 65, starkly contrasting with the modest increase of 2 from his level ups, leading him to conclude that the synergy between the death penalty and inversion was profoundly powerful. Suddenly, Yuri's call drew his attention forward, where he saw the room of the 5th floor mid-boss. Mana shared that the Magic Tower Hermes is believed to encompass 10 floors, placing them at the midpoint of the tower. Given that the conquest of the tower had commenced not long ago, Yuri and she were the pioneers in uncovering this room. However, upon returning to the 1st floor to strategize for the battle, they found themselves ensnared by Nagishi. Mana shouted in anger, exclaiming that just thinking about the situation infuriated her. Yuri attempted to pacify Mana once more, and he informed them that Nagishi and his group should be just ahead. He pushed the door open, imparting that no amount of preparation or strategy could fully anticipate a mid-boss's challenge, underlining the seriousness required. As he stepped inside, a man was suddenly thrown into the air, unnoticed by him until it was too late. The man crashed against the wall with a hard slam but, fortunately, remained alive. Turning his attention forward, Nagishi noticed their arrival. He acknowledged his survival and directed attention to the mid-boss guarding the room. The Orc Lord, enraged, leaped towards Nagishi in attack. He called out to Nagishi with concern, but Nagishi dismissively assured him that he required no concern from his likes. As the Orc Lord brought down its axe, Nagishi blocked the strike with his shield, boasting that an attack of such caliber couldn't penetrate his Aegis Mimesis. Nagishi managed to repel the Orc Lord's axe, causing the creature to kneel from imbalance. Nagishi explained that the group battle with the lizardmen caught him off guard with a surprise attack, but in a one-on-one confrontation, he had no intention of losing. Nagishi then cautioned him not to look away, promising to demonstrate that he was on a completely different level compared to small fry like him. Yuri approached the man who had been thrown to inquire if he was okay, to which he replied that, somehow, he was. The man then marveled at Nagishi's prowess, noting that despite being sent flying by just one attack, Nagishi stood unflinching. The Orc Lord swung its axe at Nagishi, who merely used his shield to block the attack. Nagishi remained steadfast, his footing pierced into the floor from the force of the Orc Lord's blow, yet he teased the creature with a smile, provoking it into a furious scream. The Orc Lord then lifted its axe, gathering force for a series of powerful, directional swings at Nagishi. Exhausted and catching its breath, the Orc Lord was taken aback when Nagishi mocked the true power of a mid-boss, teasingly questioning if a creature like it posed any real challenge. As the Orc Lord persisted in its futile attempts to strike Nagishi, he, observing from a distance, speculated on the shield's origin, presumably a reward from a boss within the magic tower and its unique power. He acknowledged that Najishi's personal stats might not be exceptional, but the shield enabled Najishi to fend off the mid-boss's attacks effortlessly. With another attack from the Orc Lord, Najishi nonchalantly remarked on the simplicity of its tactics. He then used his shield to push the Orc Lord back, signaling his minions to engage. They swiftly attacked the Orc Lord's flanks, causing it significant pain. Najishi seized the moment to leap above the Orc Lord, scolding it for its vulnerability, and forcefully striking its head with his shield. The Orc Lord, overcome with pain, fell defeated. Najishi then turned, mockingly inquiring how the spectacle was received, boastfully crediting the victory to the true power of a challenger. He smiled, acknowledging the significant advantage conferred by unique equipment. Najishi, delighted by the acknowledgement, laughed off the suggestion that they, as lesser challengers, could have managed to defeat a mid-boss, urging them to show gratitude towards him, the great Najishi. At that moment, another man urgently pointed out something behind Najishi, urging him to look at the astonishing sight. Najishi turned, only to find himself shocked by the presence of a huge treasure chest. Najishi, overcome with excitement, rushed to the treasure chest, proclaiming the certainty of finding a super rare item within. Embracing the chest, he declared it superior even to the one that had contained the Aegis Mimesis. But then Yoshito, haunted by the memory of previous traps and puzzled over the presence of such a remarkable chest as a reward for a 5th floor mid-boss, he called out to Najishi, urging caution, aware that even a moment's inattention could trigger the tower's notorious traps. As Najishi opened the treasure chest, disappointment struck when he found it empty. This frustration quickly turned to shock as a massive magic circle materialized above them. He shielded his face, eyes reflexively shutting as a bright light enveloped them. In mere seconds, they found themselves teleported elsewhere within the tower. Upon regaining his bearings, he queried their new location. Mana and Yuri, equally alarmed, confirmed they were no longer in the mid-boss room. Najishi's shout of disbelief echoed through the space, prompting him to call out Najishi's name in confusion. Najishi, stricken with horror, revealed he had felt this ominous atmosphere only once before. Asked to specify their whereabouts, Najishi disclosed they were on the magic tower's top floor. As a purple magic power circle formed in front of them, a man of imposing stature appeared seated upon a throne, signaling to everyone, as Najishi pointed out, that they had inadvertently entered the boss room. The boss then opens its eyes and unleashes a scream, causing the room to shake uncontrollably. He couldn't believe they were actually in the boss room, but then a system pop-up appeared in front of them, warning that they were in the Magic Tower Hermes, top floor, and that forced teleportation to the boss room was confirmed. Upon reading the system message, he realized that the boss in front of them was the master of the Magic Tower, the Ogre Emperor. Suddenly, the Emperor dashed towards them, appearing above at incredible speed. He swung down his sword, breaking the floor in the process, but fortunately, they all dodged in time. He realized that the Ogre Emperor was on a different level than any enemy he had faced before and, except for him, their stats weren't enough, which meant they couldn't fight the Ogre Emperor head-on. He shouted to them to get back and that he would handle it, but Najishi shouted back at him not to spew nonsense and to stay quiet, or else he would get himself killed. He was going to explain that even if he died, he would be revived, but before he could explain, Najishi dashed towards the Emperor while shouting to his men to attack. The man swung his sword and hit the Emperor's feet, and the other men also struck the Emperor. The man was confident that their attack was a sure hit, but the Emperor didn't even get scratched by it and raised his sharp claws to attack back. But then, Najishi shoutingly ran towards him and shouted not to underestimate him, the Dominator, Najishi. However, when the Emperor swung his claws down at Najishi, he was slashed, his shield shattering into pieces, leaving everyone stunned in horror and shock. Yoshito was also stunned, recalling Najishi's assurance that his Aegis Mimesis could defend against any type of attack. However, the system displayed a message to everyone stating that due to insufficient stats, the ability of Aegis Mimesis could not be activated. This left him staring in disbelief at the lifeless Najishi on the ground, pondering the system's message. The man rushed to Najishi in worry, but Yoshito urged them to get away from there. Confused, he hesitated, and it was too late. The Emperor bisected him with a swift slash of his sword, killing him instantly. He clenched his trembling hand and bit his lip in anger, facing the Ogre Emperor with determination. As the Emperor advanced towards them, Mana and Yuri, paralyzed with horror, insisted that they should flee. Mana glanced towards the door, shouting that they could still run, only to be shocked to find that the door was sealed with magic, blocking their escape. Yuri, tears streaming down her face in fear, asked if they were going to die there as well, as the Emperor pulled his sword back, gathering force for another strike. He aimed it down at Yuri, who was too petrified to move. Accepting her fate, she closed her eyes. Suddenly, someone dashed in front of her, blocking the Emperor's attack with his sword, leaving the ladies utterly stunned. He declared that he wouldn't let anyone else die from that point on, swearing to make it happen, even at the cost of his own life. The Emperor tried to attack him once again, but he managed to jump away to avoid it. He then leaped and slashed at the Emperor's chest, but noticed his attack was shallow. The Emperor countered with incredible speed, appearing above him and shocking him. It then swung its sword down, shattering the floor, but fortunately, he managed to dodge in time. He ran back towards the Emperor at full speed and attempted to strike its head, but the Emperor blocked his attack. Yuri asked Mana what was happening, and Mana could hardly believe that Yoshito was fighting the boss one-on-one. Despite being enhanced by the death penalty, he was still being pushed back by the Emperor, a testament to the boss's strength. Realizing he lacked the necessary stats to defeat the Emperor, he decided to focus on depleting the Emperor's stamina first. He taunted the Emperor, declaring he would kill it after dying a few times himself. After a swift dash, they engaged in a fierce one-on-one battle, during which Yoshito managed to strike the Emperor's head repeatedly, provoking its anger. The Emperor retaliated, and Yoshito, recognizing his limit, allowed the Emperor to kill him with its claws. Before his body hit the ground, he saw Yuri, stunned and horrified, scream as the system announced his death. As a death penalty, a permanent debuff of 55 agility was applied, which, due to his inversion skill, became a bonus of plus 55 agility. He reassured Yuri, telling her it was all good because he would continue to revive until the Emperor was defeated. Lana mentioned the infinite revival, but Yuri pointed out that using it triggered significant negative effects, leaving them wondering how he could still fight. After being killed by the Emperor again, his res increased by 20, and after another death, his HP increased by 320. However, he knew these stats were not what he needed. He then fervently wished for a stat increase that could deal fatal damage to enemies. Waiting for the Emperor's attack, it killed him instantly. He opened his eyes quickly, sitting up from his prone position. Catching his breath, he looked at his hand and then placed it on his face, expecting the excruciating pain of death to drive him mad. However, he smiled, realizing his desired stat had increased. His attack had increased by 140. Delighted by the significant increase, he noticed another system update, indicating that he had unlocked the ability to specify a respawn point due to reaching a certain level of proficiency with the infinite revival skill. Curious, he accessed the system for a more detailed explanation. Understanding its utility, he grinned, recognizing how useful it would be. He then stood up, ready to be revived once more. He spawned back to life, prepared for the next phase of the battle. While being spawned, he guesses the new feature is probably to prevent him from getting stuck. If he were unable to respawn anywhere other than exactly where he had died, there would be a large number of cases where he would just die again. But if he were able to choose his respawn point, he should be able to escape a death loop. He then walks to the side of the Emperor, knowing that if it was on the battlefield, just like it could be used to get to his opponent's blind spot. He stops behind the Emperor's back, bends down ready to be revived, and jumps behind the Emperor while shouting that this time, it's his turn to kill the Emperor. He then hits the Emperor with his sword from behind, making it shout in pain. Mana shouts in disbelief that he moved to the back in just a moment, making him confused and wonder if that was how it seemed to them. The Emperor then looked back and swung his sword at him, but he bowed his head down in time to avoid it while shouting that Nagishi and those men were a nasty bunch, but still, he never thought for a single time that they deserved to die. He then asks if he is right that by defeating the boss of a magic tower, he can get his hands on a unique item, but tells them that right now, what he desires even more than that is the Emperor's life. The Emperor once again attacked him with its sword, but the Emperor was shocked to see that he dodged it and shattered its sharp claws. He then swung his sword forward to the Ogre Emperor, who was sweating in fear, and successfully hit it in the head, making it shout in pain and lie on the ground. Defeated. He exhaled in relief and put his sword back in his inventory. The system showed him that he had defeated the boss of the magic tower, Hermes, and the conquest reward was a unique piece of equipment and magic stones that had been sent to his inventory. He was happy about the reward he got but had mixed feelings about it. Suddenly, Yuri hugged him from behind and thanked God that he was safe, but then realized her action and walked away while apologizing to him in shyness. He told Yuri that it was fine, and Mana thanked him. Mana tells him that if he hadn't defeated the boss, Yuri and she would definitely have died, but worriedly tells him that the way he was fighting is too reckless and sacrificing himself like that over and over again is painful to watch. She then apologized to him that even though he saved them, she was complaining. He patted her head and told her not to worry about it. He then apologized to her for making her watch him die so many times and tells them that even if he failed over and over again, he would always come back. That said, he then shouts that it was really fucking hurt seriously, and remembers that he has said the same thing somewhere before. Mana stutteringly replies that he was right, tears welling up in her eyes. He then catches his breath and tells them that, as much as possible, he'll do his best not to die. The ladies exchange smiles and both agree with him. Suddenly, their conversation is interrupted when the tower shakes, and then the system notifies them that the boss of the magic tower, Hermes, has been defeated, so the Hermes tower will disappear in 10 seconds, and they will be forcefully relocated. Yuri remembers that after defeating the boss, magic towers disappear. He waves them goodbye and tells them that they should meet again outside. He then looks back at the dead men on the floor and tells them that he won't forget them. He bids them goodbye. On the other hand, from outside, the Hermes tower shook and slowly disappeared until it was gone, as if it never existed. Meanwhile, in some office, a lady asks if the Hermes tower was conquered even though it wasn't supposed to be even half complete yet. A man hands a tablet to the lady and tells her that it was as she said. However, the disappearance of Hermes has been confirmed to be true, and a detailed report on the matter should be arriving soon. The lady puts the tablet down on the table and asks the man if she was right to think it's become somewhat amusing. Before that, on the street, Yoshito woke up and stood up while the people around him were shocked to see that the magic tower Hermes was disappearing. He stared at the tower slowly disappearing in front of everyone, looked at his palm, closed it, and raised it while shouting confidently that he conquered it. He excitedly smiled, but his smile faded away in an instant. He then heard someone asking if the boss of Hermes was really defeated even though it wasn't even supposed to have been explored to the 5th floor yet, and if some strong individual took down the boss while he carefully listened to them. He wants to shout that the one who defeated the boss was him, but he knows he would have been happy to announce it like that if there hadn't been any casualties. He stands up thinking that conquering a magic tower for the first time has really increased his self-confidence. He then tells himself that they should not get too carried away. He peeks back at the people who are in shock and decides to keep it a secret that he is the one who defeated the boss for now because he would stand out too much. He then silently walked away, deciding to quietly get out of there, but then Mana and Yuri noticed him and shouted his name, making him look back in shock. Mana excitedly asked him what kind of unique equipment the one he got from defeating the boss was, making him call Mana an idiot. Upon hearing Mana's words, the challengers stare at him, and they all know that he was definitely the one who got sold by that garbage skill, Infinite Revival, but he was now the dominator of Hermes. Later, he grabbed a drink from a vending machine in some alley, opened it, and was glad that they had finally got away. He remembered the challengers asking him how he defeated the boss, what kind of weapon he used, and asking him to join them while others were clearly annoyed with him. Mana apologized to him and admitted that she had been careless. Yuri told him that taking down the boss of the magic tower and becoming the dominator of Hermes naturally made him the center of attention. He couldn't believe he was a dominator now and told them it felt strange because, not long ago, he was just a weakling challenger, but it seemed that buying the skill stone for Infinite Revival wasn't a mistake after all. Yuri realized something when she heard about Infinite Revival and asked him if it was true that there is a negative effect from dying and how he managed to use it so well. He scratched his head, unsure of what to answer, and wondered how he could even begin to explain about inversion and where he should even start. Yuri told him she wasn't trying to corner him and was just curious about it, so if it was difficult, he didn't need to answer. He agreed and drank his cola, but he knew it wasn't really that big of a deal to explain it to them. Mana told them to put the explanation aside for a moment. She then excitedly looked at him and asked him about the equipment he got as the reward for defeating the boss, making him stutteringly tell her that she was pretty crazy about that kind of stuff. He then threw the can in the trash while telling them to wait for a second and tried to open his status window, but he realized he couldn't open it. Mana told him it was because they were outside of the magic tower. Fundamentally, the window can only be opened while inside a magic tower, and the use of various other things such as stats or skills are also limited to the inside of the magic tower. Because of that system, there aren't incidents of challengers causing problems in normal society. However, there is one exception. The one place where challengers are able to use their power outside of the magic towers would be at the site of the magic towers. He extends his hand at the site of the magic tower and walks inside. When they enter the site of the magic tower Hermes, he tells them he still can't get used to the strange feeling that fills the site of the towers. He then opens his window, and the ladies immediately appear beside him. He tells them that the name of the unique equipment he received as a reward for conquering the tower is Foes Aminos. He clicked the item, and a strong light came out from the system, making them all amazed. Then, a sparkling light appeared on his side, and when he opened his hand, a sword slowly appeared on it. He then holds Foes Aminos, which is a unique weapon. The ladies were amazed to see the reward for clearing the Tower of Hermes and stared at his Foes Aminos for a few minutes. He swung it around, telling them it was quite lightweight and easy to use, making him look forward to the next magic tower conquest. Lana noticed Yuri thinking and hesitating on her side, smiling softly, understanding her feelings, and having an idea. Mana then walked closer to him and asked how about they form a party together from the beginning next time, shocking Yuri. Yuri then raised her hand and shouted that she wanted to join them too. He was momentarily taken aback by Yuri's reaction. Yuri, blushing, put her hand down and shyly asked if she could join them. He smiled and told her that she certainly could because they were already close friends after all. The ladies happily looked at each other and shouted in unison that they did it. Mana then excitedly looked at him, leaned in, and asked which magic tower they should go to next, whether it should be of a similar scale to Hermes or perhaps a larger magic tower. She suggested challenging Zeus, to which Yuri replied that they shouldn't. He thought for a moment while the ladies argued behind him. He then got their attention by saying that after leaving Hermes, there was a place he wanted to visit right away. Yuri, worried, stutteringly asked him where that was, and he replied that it was in Tokyo, at the Challenger's Management Bureau. The ladies, confused, asked him why there and not a magic tower. He explained to them that, as they knew, the Management Bureau buys magic stones and equipment at higher prices than the magic tower stalls, so he wanted to go there to exchange his items for money. He confessed that after purchasing Infinite Revival, he was completely broke and had even accrued debt, leaving the ladies staring at him in stunned silence. The Tokyo Challenger Management Bureau is a government-operated organization aimed at supporting adventurers. It offers real-time updates on each magic tower. The buying and selling of magic stones and weapons are conducted at fair prices, and unlike the often dubious deals at the magic tower stalls, the Management Bureau is known for its fairness and is highly valued. Additionally, since it's built on the site of a magic tower, there are no restrictions on the power of the challengers, which is another significant feature. Among the rewards for clearing Hermes, there were not only unique weapons but also magic stones, making him hopeful he could make some money. The lady welcomed him and asked if he would like to exchange his magic stones for money, to which he replied yes and opened his inventory. While waiting on the system, he wondered how many magic stones there were. Clicking it, both he and the lady were surprised by the abundance that appeared. He was stunned that there was indeed that many magic stones as part of the rewards for clearing the dungeon. She then stutteringly told him they should proceed with the exchange process, visibly charmed by the quantity. A moment later, with shaking hands, he asked the lady if she was serious, and realized that even with his debt, he was now wealthy. He walked back to Yuri and Mana, excitedly asking them what he should do with the money. Yuri advised that it was probably best to avoid reckless spending, a sentiment Mana agreed with. Mana then warned him not to get carried away and end up back in debt from overspending, a thought that made his dream of extravagance vanish as he replied that he got it. Suddenly, the lady saw him and told him she had found him, making him feel a surge of strong power. She approached him, revealing she had heard of his arrival at the Management Bureau and had come looking for him. She stopped in front of him, and as he faced her, he asked who she was. She introduced herself as Raido Fayun, the chief of Tokyo's Challenger Management Bureau, and asked if she could have a moment of his time. She then seriously addressed him as the dominator of the Magic Tower Hermes, Takamichi Yoshito. He noticed that Fayun's face was quite familiar to him and remembered that within the Management Bureau that gathers tower challengers, Fayun is known as a monster reputed to be the strongest. He guessed she was scouted to the Management Bureau after conquering 3 magic towers as a challenger and recalled that she even appeared in advertisements for the Bureau. Her face was ubiquitous across the city, but he wondered why she was seeking him out specifically. He then asked her what the president of the Management Bureau wanted with him, and she replied that first, she intended to hold a hearing about how he suddenly conquered the Magic Tower of Hermes, and second, she aimed to verify the true power of the new dominator. After he recounted everything and followed her, she acknowledged that he was caught in a trap and moved to the boss's room, noting that this information must be reported to the other challengers. She expressed her gratitude for his openness and informed him that regarding Dominator Nagishi and his party, the Management Bureau would ensure to contact their surviving family members. Noticing their silence, she explained that it was not uncommon for people to lose their lives while challenging the magic towers, but it goes without saying that such losses were painful. This left him stunned, and he bit his lip, realizing that they had been telling themselves there was nothing they could do about Nagishi and the others, but the truth was that it was very painful for them. He wiped away his tears, finding some comfort in being able to acknowledge this pain openly. A moment later, he inquired about their location, to which Fayun responded that they were in the Management Bureau's training room. While they were busy looking around, Fayun called his name and threw something at him, which he caught. It was a sword, but he noted it felt a bit dull. She explained it was the type of sword used in the Management Bureau's training hall and told him that from now on, he could use it. She then thrust another object into the floor and declared she would allow him to fight her, stating that properly understanding the true power of dominators was also the responsibility of the chief of the bureau. He acknowledged that refusing Fayun's challenge seemed impossible, but Mana's encouragement to assert his dominance by claiming he'd send the bureau chief flying made him laugh, albeit forcefully. He mused over Mana's confidence, then gripped the sword tighter, resolving to face the challenge with utmost seriousness. "If I'm to do this, I might as well give it my all," he declared. Fayun inquired if he was ready, and with a firm yes, he braced himself. Aware that his adversary was the formidable chief of the Management Bureau, he couldn't help but think he might present a tougher challenge than she anticipated, given his conquest of a towering boss. "Let's begin," Fayun announced. To his shock, she vanished from sight only to reappear beside him like a gust of wind, launching a swift strike that he narrowly evaded by bending away. Fayun pressed on, her onslaught of attacks relentless. Despite his efforts to dodge and block, her speed was overwhelming, forcing him to retreat while parrying her strikes. Eventually, he tumbled and leaped back, creating distance. Panic set in when he sensed her presence right behind him. With a quick turn and dash, he evaded her surprise attack from behind. Gasping for breath and grappling with the realization of Fayun's overpowering strength, he reflected on his journey. He had overcome the boss through repeated deaths, yet here he stood, facing a dominator who had conquered magic towers without succumbing once. The disparity in their abilities was stark, yet it wasn't the moment to dwell on differences or let frustration take hold. "If defense alone won't cut it, I'll turn the tables by embracing the very risk of death that others shy away from," he thought. Fayun, mid-attack, found herself taken aback as he boldly announced the start of his offensive, charging forward to meet her in the center of the room. She slowed down upon seeing it and tightly grasped her sword. When he noticed this, he lifted his sword backward to gain force and swung it down at her while shouting that he was faster now. However, she dodged it easily and positioned herself for an attack. He couldn't believe it and was thrown back by her attack, growling in pain. She told him it was unexpected. Landing on the floor, he retorted that against a regular monster or person, she would be able to evade her opponent's attacks with no problem, and he launched another attack at her. She effortlessly blocked his attack and counterattacked, which he avoided, telling her that just now, if she hadn't hesitated, it would have been a one-sided fight. She rolled her sword in her hand and swung at him, but he jumped away, landing at a distance from her. He told her that she thought he was defenseless and hesitated for a moment to attack him with her sword. But he didn't think it was just her being kind to him because he was acting in a way she didn't understand. So, he thought her hand simply froze out of instinct. However, he also took a chance, and the reason is that he has infinite revival. He then dashed toward her, apologizing for playing unfairly. She blocked his sword, and he explained that without doing so, there was no way an ordinary person could win against her. She pushed him away when she retracted her sword and dodged his attack, remembering that she had received a report on infinite revival and that Yoshito could return from death endlessly, moving forward without fear of death. She appeared closer to him, pondering that Yoshito's skill was a fearsome ability. She then struck Yoshito with the sword handle in the face, sending him flying, and warned him it wouldn't happen a second time. He cursedly said that it hurt, but then he stared at her, and she was shocked when he managed to point his sword close to her chest. He then told her that compared to dying, her attack didn't hurt at all. She stared at him seriously for a moment and smiled. She then turned around and told him she understood his power now and would acknowledge her loss this time. But she stopped talking when he collapsed to the floor. She bent down closer to him in confusion, and he shakily told her he didn't care who won or lost, but he needed medical treatment. He then passed out, and his soul emerged from his body, causing Yuri and Mana to rush to him, worried. In a panic, Mana urged Yuri to quickly push his soul back, which Yuri did in an attempt to save him. A moment later, he awoke and realized he had almost died. Fayun reminded him that he hadn't actually died, which made him exclaim to her that that wasn't the point. He took a deep breath to calm himself and told her that since they had fought, it should be settled, and he asked if he could now return. However, she replied no, telling him that they still needed to have an important conversation. He asked what she meant by that, and she explained that, as the chief of the Management Bureau, she had verified his true power exceeded that of an average member. Because of this, she wished to extend a special request to him. Yuri inquired about the nature of a special request from the chief of the Bureau, and Mana added that it was the one rumored to offer an absolutely amazing reward. Fayun informed him that the reward could be given in cash, believing it to be an amount that would fully satisfy him. He expressed his appreciation for her offer but asked for the details of the request. She revealed that a few hours ago, the Management Bureau had verified the appearance of a new tower. Currently, the entrance was being sealed off, so she wanted him to enter that tower and gather information about it. She further explained that it was the preliminary investigation of the Mage Tower, Persephone, and it was a request she could only entrust to him. He questioned whether it wasn't standard procedure for the Management Bureau to investigate whenever a new magic tower appeared and why she specifically wanted him to undertake this task. She explained that they had already dispatched challengers from the Management Bureau, 2 parties of 5, making a total of 10 people, but not a single one had returned. Yuri, worriedly, asked if truly not even one person returned. Mana, incredulous, suggested that surely it couldn't be true. Fayun admitted that she too initially doubted the news but had to accept it as fact when the search team they sent afterwards found every single one of the dispatched challengers dead near the entrance. They all seemed to be desperately trying to escape, yet looked as though they ran out of energy just a step away from the exit. He asked her to wait a moment, questioning if he was correct in assuming the area near the entrance should be a safe zone, to which she agreed. He pointed out that monsters shouldn't appear in a safe area and questioned why they would die there. She responded that the bodies of the challengers bore no wounds from monster attacks, leaving the cause of death uncertain. Upon receiving the report, she had only requested the retrieval of their bodies, calling back the search team immediately due to the dangerous implications and their lack of understanding regarding the cause of death. She then informed him that this was the current situation at the Magic Tower Persephone. He sighed, realizing that because of his infinite revival ability, she wanted to offer him that special request. She cautioned him not to misunderstand, as she had no intention of carelessly risking his life. However, she also couldn't permit any more deaths within the Management Bureau. She then walked closer to him, asking seriously if he would accept the request for her sake. He looked at her silently for a moment, sighed, and replied that he understood. Later, in the Mage Tower Persephone, he enters the safe area. He inhales deeply and slaps himself to gather his thoughts. He then swore that he would identify the cause of death of the challengers, feeling the urgent need to alleviate everyone's worries, especially recalling Yuri crying and pleading with him not to die. He opened his inventory, determined to move forward, and took out his item, knowing they were relying on him. He then grabbed his foe's Amino's sword and proceeded deeper into the tower. In the hallway, skeleton monsters roamed, but he dashed behind them, startling the skeletons and easily killing them with a single strike. He noticed that his foe's Aminos was light and easy to swing, but he had expected it to be unique equipment. He was about to test out the unique ability of his foe's Aminos when purple smoke appeared behind him. He felt the power of the smoke but realized it too late as the smoke enveloped him. He tried to cover his face as the smoke approached, swinging his sword continuously in front of him while yelling at the smoke to get away. However, the system pop-ups appeared, and he was shocked to read what they displayed. After reading, he understood the cause of all the challengers' deaths. It was the abnormal condition known as the Curse of Persephone, which had now afflicted him, causing him to face death in 120 seconds. His breathing became labored as seconds passed, but he knew it was the right decision to involve him, acknowledging that a normal challenger would have panicked in such a situation. He knew that if they could leave the Magic Tower, any abnormal conditions, buffs, and debuffs would be cancelled. The dispatched challengers, afflicted by the curse, would have frantically made their way to the exit. Yet, despite reaching the safe area, the curse took effect just one step away from it. He realized it made sense that there were no injuries on the bodies because the cause of death was that abnormal condition. He was surprised when the purple smoke rose in front of him, but it then slowly drifted to the side and hurried away, leaving him alone. Realizing that after transferring the curse onto him, it had completed its task, he became infuriated and yelled at it not to underestimate him. It goes without saying that against his infinite revival ability, the curse's effects would be inverted. The curse then reversed, fully restoring his condition. Smiling, he thanked the curse and chased after it, shouting that because of the curse, his body was in perfect condition. He looked in the direction where the cursed smoke had retreated, wondering if he should give chase. Upon reaching the entrance of the room surrounded by the cursed smoke, he realized that normal challengers wouldn't stand a chance against the tower. He walked into the room, noticing the fog thickening, and was shocked to see a huge pot of purple water in the center. He deduced that it must be the source of the cursed smoke. Suddenly, a sharp magic ball was thrown at him, but he narrowly avoided it by turning his head to the side just in time. When it hit the wall, it exploded, and then a monster emerged from the pod. It was the cursed spring gatekeeper, which threw numerous magic balls at him. He easily dodged them while retrieving his foe's Aminos from his inventory. It shook in anger upon seeing him avoid its attack and screamed in anger. Thick smoke then rose up from the pod, shocking him. It hurled the cursed smoke at him and clapped its 4 hands in excitement, eager to see him suffer. He understood that it controlled the cursed smoke and its killing intent was literally overflowing due to its overlapping curses. Suddenly, a skeleton appeared behind him, ready to slash him, but he turned around and cut the skeleton in half just in time. He then noticed that the cursed spring gatekeeper had called for more monsters. Skeletons rushed at him from all sides, and he tried his best to block them and fend them off on his own. But one skeleton found an opening and slashed him from behind. He fell to the ground, hurt, and collapsed in his own blood. The cursed spring gatekeeper laughed happily upon seeing him apparently dead, but he, smiling, asked it if it could afford to be so relaxed. Then, his inversion reversed all of his curses, fully restoring his condition. He then rose again and eliminated all of the skeletons in his way at speed, taunting the cursed spring gatekeeper by asking if it wasn't too bad and telling it that the magic tower's curse was nothing but the highest quality recovery medicine for him. He then slashed the cursed spring gatekeeper to pieces with his foe's aminos. Afterwards, he heard the water in the pod change, and when he looked down, he noticed that the spring's curse had disappeared. Well guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, comment part 2 in the comments section. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time again. Frustrated, he then woke up and saw himself on the destroyed ground, wondering if he had come back to life. He sits up and notices that his body feels heavy, thinking it is probably because his agility has become 1. He knows that with it, even moving around is going to be tough for him. He then looks around, wondering where that place is and if he was right that he has fallen to a lower floor. He felt something around him, making him wonder what that atmosphere was, because he had never heard of such a place in the lower levels. He then noticed something shining in front of him and was shocked to see that it was a skill stone, and it was golden, which means it was ultra rare. He knows that it can be sold for a high price and it might be possible to repay the debt he took on. He tried to stand up, knowing that it was the only thing he was determined to bring back with him no matter what, and walked slowly to it, noticing that there were no monsters there, making him think that it was easy to win. But then, he stepped on tiles and the wall released a lot of holes. Suddenly, it threw knives that hit him in every part of his body, including his eye, making him shout in pain and die for the 5th time. His infinite revival has been activated, and as his death penalty, a permanent debuff of 65 strength has been applied.